broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning. Good morning, La. Welcome to our study. Welcome to our study of Steps to the Great Perfection. Jigme Lingpa's commentary on the seven ways of training the mind, which might be quite relevant for some of us who are practicing Buddhists. In fact, I think there's nothing that we're going to be touching on here which is not relevant for Buddhists anywhere. Of course, this does come from the Great Perfection tradition, but it is really universal reflections and universal considerations that we're discussing here. And we're very fortunate that we're touching on a great heritage of experience, insight and experience coming down to the present day, but going way back to the primordial Buddha, to Garab Dorje, Longchenpa, and Jigme Lingpa. Myself, I would have received this as a Long, as part of the Longchen Rabjam transmissions. I never received the explanations as such, but I did receive all the Lungs for the Longchen Rabjam. So I hope it's acceptable that I'm presenting this. So basically, you could say this lineage comes down from through Longchen Rabjam, and received from him this transmission several times. Kindly generate the intention to put this teaching into practice, and very much with the awareness of the suffering that there is in the world, and understanding the nature of the samsaric condition, to then wishing to alleviate it. We're going to be talking about karma, and as with everything that we're doing in the Buddhist path, we are looking into what really matters in terms of our experience, which is situated within our consciousness. All of us carry consciousness. We are consciousness. It's difficult to differentiate between us and our consciousness. If we're having a reflection about consciousness, it's consciousness that's having it. It's the most immediate experience we could ever have. So we cannot say that this realm is in the realm of the abstract, or even the notion of the spiritual, which very often is the science around the mind. The idea is that it's something mystical, but it's far from mystical. It's the most immediate experience we always have. When we come to it from the tradition of the Great Perfection, it is like approaching a medical system. And of course, the Great Perfection speaks about the natural abiding, spontaneously presence of purity and perfection as it exists within us. But it is a bit like within medicine, we of course appreciate that we have the potential to be well. This is the Great Perfection is telling us, yes, you can be cured. Your natural condition is health. But at the same time, you wouldn't have a medical system that wouldn't look into how does the illness come about? How is it that this condition is obscured? And so when we're looking into the condition of karma, or understanding karma, when we're looking at this teaching, it's to enable us to understand our condition presently. Yes, this consciousness is naturally perfect, and yet presently it undergoes various kinds of perceptions. And to understand the law of karma is to really understand what it drives, what is behind all our perceptions, our experience of the world, our experience of ourselves, and our relationship between ourselves, the world, and others, and so forth. So to understand karma, but also all the other reflections that we're doing here, is really looking into the science of this consciousness and how it works in its present condition, and working constructively with it. So of course, famously, karma has been hijacked in the modern discourse, and it's been teamed up with some leftover concepts from religion, borrowed from religion, and various things. It's a very confused understanding and very often misappropriated, misused, and so forth, which of course is key in this discussion. But it is also something that has been discussed many places. Here in Siddhartha's Intent, we've done some webinars on Tralik Rinpoche's work, Karma, what it is, what it isn't, and why it matters. And recently also, a book was published. I don't know how recent it is, but anyway, I just came across it. And this is it's a book by, let's see here. It's by Longchenpa, edited by one of his senior students, Carolyn Gimian. And I haven't read it, but I have no doubt this is something also that would really enable us to understand and appreciate what we mean with karma. But karma is really the understanding of the conditions that drive us. And I just looked in this book very briefly, and this is at the very beginning of the book. You find this little note from Trungpa Rinpoche, where this quote from him where he says, "Karma is like a game of chess. Wherever you are on the board at this moment is the result of your past actions. But whatever you're going to do in this moment depends on the present situation. The present situation is partly influenced by the past, otherwise we wouldn't be here. But at the same time, the present is also influenced by the future, which is open space and freedom. So we are sitting at a place of possibility. It's a bit like this this saying that the Tibetans have: if you want to know what you did in the past, look at your present situation. If you want to know what you will be in the future, look at your present actions. So what's implicit here is responsibility for what we do now. So I guess that's the title. The future is open. This work on karma. And we very rightly could say, well, so many of my choices are influenced by my existing conditions, my existing wiring, my existing habits, and that's true. And I think we could say the degree to which we have more wisdom, more vipassana, the more we have that, the more we have freedom. And our ability to choose will be greatly enhanced. When we're caught up in a narrow space, then very often it's difficult for us to choose. So the more we practice, the more we settle the mind, the more we have wider perspective, the more we will be able to work freely with our conditions. But karma is understanding how we function. There's a little bit of an embarrassment when and I often talk about this because I haven't yet met them, but supposedly there are Buddhists out there that feel inclined to, at inappropriate times, say, oh, well, that's just your karma. It happens with people who obviously don't know what karma means, but it's also a bit silly when Buddhists, who supposedly should have educated themselves in understanding what karma is, say things like that. Because the thing is, everything is our karma. Of course, we can talk about good karma, bad karma, and it is something we need to come back to and understand. I'm here due to causes and conditions, but it's also about what comes next. But so it is something that we should take into consideration. But to use it as some explanation for things is stating the obvious. Yes, everything is karma. So it's so to just say it is sometimes when there's something when we can't explain things or others, unless people really have an understanding of karma is, then they might get offended. They might feel that you're making a very facile, glib, unsympathetic comment. So we have to be really careful with how we use this word and really just understand that everything is due to actions. Karma is basic to the dualistic mind. So everything that we experience within the dualistic mind is based on causes and conditions, are effects due to causes and conditions. Anyway, just a little bit of an intro here on what is a big topic. So this is the second mind training, and from the child scripture, which is then the root tantra, Sanje Sechigigyu, it says, ponder the fact that all activities manifest as the cause of suffering. And also in those of you who practice the Jetsunintik, it would say all the pleasures of this, all the pleasures of the world, they might all the pleasures of this world, they might all the pleasures that appear in this world are fleeting, and they are in fact like fruits, which poisons fruit that will mature. And so this is implicit in any dualistic action, that all activity will inevitably, caught within the cycle of duality, create the condition of duality, suffering. There's a way out, but this is what we need to understand, that this is the nature of acting within the confused condition. Scripture-based contemplation, the Sutra of 100 Actions state, the joys and sorrows of living beings are karma, the sage has taught. Karma comes in various forms, and from it the variety of beings. They take on and wander in various forms. Thus is the great web of karma. So it's extensive. When we say the sage, as you can see with capital S, it's the Buddha. But we can see the extent of this, that everything is this web of action and result. And it's not something mystical, it's something we can verify. Everything we do has an action, has a result. Any thought, the way that we perceive things, and so on. Maybe the actions don't come right away, but they're part of creating the future. So the commentary runs, there is no question that all the joys and sorrows, the good and bad, the wholesomeness and negativity that we experience are due solely to our own karma. In fact, karma, as many will know, means action. So when you see the word karma, if it sounds a bit foreign or like it's not quite clear, just say action. You can almost replace, wherever we say karma, we can say action. All the activities, the commentary continues, all the activities of this life create dissonance. Defeating enemies, protecting loved ones, seeking profit through farming or business, pursuing wealth and influence, acting out our lust and anger, offering loving advice to others, working for a living and making a name for ourselves, and so on. None of this is anything we can rely upon or trust. Though we may do various things and manage to become prosperous, our own prosperity may up, fulfilling the desires of our enemies and thieves. While we may eat and drink, hoping to sate our desires, what we ingest may reactivate an old illness and become the cause of our own death. Hoping they will bring us some benefit, We might hold certain people dear and strike up friendships only for them to become our worst enemies. Although we have not harmed them or done anything else to them, they may badmouth us, ridicule us, belittle us, criticize us, and put us all down, all without reason. On the surface of things, it seems like everything has the nature of suffering, for all these activities end up causing us nothing but grief. What a great loss that we have not grasped this fact until now. We are describing the nature of mind in its confused condition. And in that we come from a culture where the nature of mind is not really understood, then also the nature of what happens to us is not really understood. But with an understanding of the nature of mind, we can begin to see the general patterns that come from a dualistic mind. And so when we're describing all of this, it's because we want to bring forth a very clear understanding of what the nature of mind is in its confused condition. So to engage in the path is to be aware of what we need to work with, our present conditions, and that they have there's a common denominator that runs through the confused condition, which is the naive assumption that as long as we're caught up in duality, then we could possibly find something that would fulfill us. As long as there's duality, as long as we don't recognize nature of mind and haven't settled on cleared nature of mind, then we have this condition that we need to deal with. So we are operating with a vision of enlightenment, but also presently it's important that we recognize the illness. So like I started off saying, it's like working in medicine. We have a vision of that, particularly here, of an illness that can be cured, but we need to work with the present conditions. So then the commentary continues. Now, if we think carefully, we will see that everything we have ever done is gone and will not come back. It is nothing more than a memory, an image in our mind, like last night's dream. Even what manifests today is like tonight's dreams. And all that we do tomorrow is like tomorrow night's dream. Nothing lasts. Yet we will become obsessed. Yes, yet we still become obsessed with these pointless appearances, whiling away our time as we act out our passion and aggression, quarrel, flatter, and insult, hoard and accumulate material things, experience pleasure and pain, and indulge our prejudices. We end up with nothing but a mass of shortcomings. By their very nature, all worldly appearances are seductive illusions. What a loss that we believe them to be permanent, stable, and unchanging. I won't concern myself with what happens from here on out. We should think sincerely to ourselves. Instead, I will look at the problems that clinging to self creates. So this final line brings home the point, which is that we shouldn't be caught up in the superficial concerns of that which has no ultimate meaning. This is not saying that our existence doesn't have meaning, but presently caught up in delusion, then we're fighting against nature. We're not recognizing the reality that things pass, things are impermanent, and clinging onto them stubbornly, disregarding the nature of reality, then we end up with a lot of frustration. And that's where we want to have this attitude to be clear on what's really meaningful. The wonderful thing with what we're teaching here, what we're being taught here, is that this is all a curable condition. The nature of mind is pure, but we need to relinquish our superficial fixations. There has to be a humble recognition that, and I think everybody can, I certainly can, humbly recognize, wow, I'm really caught up with all these pursuits of pleasure and pain and indulging prejudices and so on. So with that humble recognition, then there's this determination about instead really looking at what is the What are these problems and why they come about? So here we then have another instruction on how to effectively meditate on this. This is a bit like the one we had last time. Imagine that you have arrived in a distant and foreign land with no idea how you got there and no idea where to go. As you sit dazed and confused, 8 young men appear on the scene, all of them strangers. We have come from an isle shrouded in darkness, that of the old ground, they say, in a place that takes many months and years to reach. There is a jewel island. There is a gem that surpasses the imagination there. To get it, you must journey with no regard for the difficulties involved. Isn't this what you seek? These words spark your interest, and soon you have joined them on their trip. At times you're caught up in fierce storms, while at other times you must make your way along steep defiles, beset by dangerous beasts and lost in raging torrents. With an empty stomach and thoroughly fatigued, you continue on day and night, assuming your life will be a long one. Finally, when your days are coming to an end and your hair and beard have turned white, you make it to the island of jewels and find a variety of amazing treasures. Completely overjoyed, you turn back and head home. 3 days away from home, you come across 7 savage bandit brothers on the plain of the Four Gatherings. They snatch away the jewels that you searched for with such hardship. They strip the clothes from your body and bind your limbs tightly with chains, stabbing you viciously with arrows, spears, swords, and other sharp weapons. You with bad karma, they yell. If you have a guru, supplicate. If you have a yidam deity, arouse its compassion. If you have a dakini or dharma protector, call out for help. If you don't have any of these, meditate on the fact of death. You have now reached the border between this life and the next. Hearing this, you grow despondent. Alas, I've thought of nothing but this life and encountered such hardship. Yet it has all been pointless. What injustice! I have reached the end of this precious life. Meeting murderers in this desolate land, I have no one to go for refuge or protection, no friend and no hope of survival. All the hardships that I put myself through have not done me the slightest bit of good. I won't live out my days, for death has suddenly arrived. Alas, how frightening and pathetic it all is. As you cry and wail mournfully, the great master of Udayana appears in the sky before you, in a form endowed with the 4 mudras. Light radiates from his body, driving the savage men far away, and then it is reabsorbed. You unfortunate being, he says, this is what happens when you are obsessed with samsaric activities as though they are delicious divine nectar, when in fact they are like deadly poison. The 8 men whom you did not recognize are the mounts of the 8 collections of consciousness that seduce you away from the wisdom of your own awareness. The jewel you found on the treasure island is the ephemeral happiness of this life. This happiness is like a dream. It does not last. All the hardships that you endured are the sufferings that you so eagerly accept and that lay a foundation for this deception. The changing of the color of your hair and beard signifies the exhaustion of your life, which you wasted in a state of delusion, pursuing suffering as pleasure. The bandits' attack on your life on the plain of the 4 gatherings signified your afflictions by the 424 illnesses and your life force being taken away against your will by Yama, the Lord of Death. Oh, with bad karma like yours, whatever you do in pursuit of mundane obsessions will end up like this when you meet your demise. Hearing these words, intense regret wells up for all you have done in the past, understanding that all the pursuits of this life entail nothing but suffering by their very nature, you pray ardently to the great master Buddhayana. As you take all this in, light rays emanate from the master's heart and penetrate your own like iron hooks. At that moment, you are instantly reborn in the palace of lotus light as an enlightened guide capable of leading all sentient beings. Once you have completed this visualization, simply rest your mind in its natural state. So as we practice this, the objective is to get our priorities right. The great master Buddhayana is not as sometimes us who are brought up in a very critically minded analytical mode, we will think, oh, but that sounds just like the Marines coming in, and it's very corny. You know, here we are in danger, and then, yes, predictably, somebody comes in and saves the day. It's not really like that. It's the thing is that we abide continually with what we could call co-emergent confusion and co-emergent wisdom. And as much as we have confusion, as much we also have enlightenment. Enlightenment is never far away. Our nature, principally, is enlightened. It's what shines through. So in the midst of our confusion and our bad choices and confused dispositions and so on, then there is continually glimmer of intelligence, prajna, and the presence of enlightenment is the ground of who we are. So to have this insight is really just coming back to what's real. We've been lost in delusion, and the presence of the great master Buddhayana is the presence of what's real. There might be a moment of clarity, a moment of letting go of our obsessions, as we can see here. Someone who reaches the end of, or the falling away of their illusions, and all of a sudden a moment of clarity and regret, then yes, then there's a moment of intelligence, which if we have the fortune to have encountered the teaching or have some karmic residual, then the possibility of enlightenment is ever present. So when we're doing this visualization, we're not actually going through all of this, but we're thinking it. We're imagining what it could be like to just wasting a precious opportunity and then having the regret. And with that intelligence that's behind this reflection and contemplation, then we invoke the presence of the enlightened aspect. So this is like any mind training where we work with the conceptual mind with the intention to bring forth intelligence. Lord Jong means to train intelligence or purify a greater insight. And then particularly then with a devotion to the Vajrayana approach and the Vajrayana guru, then the way that we invoke this is particularly then through the bhakti of invoking Padmasambhava or the guru. It can also be just our own teacher. And then settling into the unconfused condition as we fuse with the teacher's wisdom. Any questions about this? I'll just tell you the Buddha that we have on our left is a teacher known as gentle splendor protector against fear. And this again comes from a very different cosmology than ours, but nevertheless, this is the history of the Great Perfection where we come across these 12 teachers. So, so from Eric Pema Kunzang's translation of the various scriptures of the from the Great Perfection teachings, then there's a section on the 12 Buddhas. And this work is called Wellsprings, but in there it reads, third, in massive light, a place composed of warmth and measure, the teacher, gentle splendor protector against fear, taught a retinue of 600,000 bodhisattvas, the teaching known as overturning the depths of samsara, peacocks with entwined necks, and the glorious tantra of the resolution of the four elements. While descending into midair and using the wind's gentle mashashu whisper, he translated them into the language of the three-tufted Garudas. This was during a time when a lifespan could last 100,000 years. So we are naturally here within a different cosmology, that of the Great Perfection lineage. Taught different times, different beings. Probably the same issues that we're dealing with here. Are these visualizations you recommend we do on a daily basis? They're particularly associated with if you're doing the if you're doing the Chetsuningti Ngondro, then this is actually part of the practice. I mean, if you're doing the Chetsuningti Ngondro and this particular study here is inspired really from the fact that many of us are doing that, then yes, we could do these as part of the Ngondro practice. But I would also say this is something that we could do anytime. So it's something that is recommended to do. If we can do it on a structural basis, that's great. I would say if you already have particular practices that you're doing in the context of the Ngondro, that's priority. But at the same time, this is something that informs everything that we're doing in Ngondro practice and in general in life. So it's something that we should do it as much as we can, and if we can do it on a daily basis, yes, for sure, this will enable us to get it straight. get our priorities clear. So that was the contemplation on impermanence. The next one is suffering and compassion. Third mind training. And the Sanjase Chigiju. Okay, somebody's asking about the three roots. Well, this is not quite topic, but we can do that, yeah. Let me do that at the end, the three roots. Yeah. Okay. Okay, the child scripture states, cultivate compassion for the 6 classes of sentient beings, make offerings to the 3 jewels, and engage in virtuous, wholesome deeds. So appreciating on one hand the confusion that all sentient beings are lost within, also understand what is the way out, which is the 3 jewels, the Buddha, the awakened one, the teaching and the community of those who are just like ourselves, engaging in the path of clarifying confusion. And the way that we do this, particularly connecting to the 3 jewels, is through making offerings and also engaging in what is constructive. At this point, you may have some understanding of death and impermanence, and that all activities entail suffering by their very nature. Nevertheless, if you have not grasped the key points of spiritual life, your appetite for food, clothing, wealth, and worldly riches will be insatiable, And you will rationalize your need for all these things by saying that they are necessary for practice. Once you get one thing, you'll need something else. And you'll do whatever it takes to get the various things that feed your bad habits. There are many who spend their entire life preoccupied solely with the 8 worldly concerns. For this very reason, you must contemplate the sufferings of samsara and cultivate compassion for the 6 classes of beings. So, as we saw before, all the activities that we engage with a dualistic mind inevitably lead to suffering. Getting caught up in this as patterns, then they then drive us, and this is the pattern of karma. But we're continually proposing that we could be free of this. And so understanding what's really valuable, then we should not be caught up with pursuing all of these things. So that's where it's very helpful to contemplate the nature of samsara and what everybody goes through of suffering. The Application of Mindfulness Sutra, Jempa Nyeshak Kido, it states, and that is, I wonder if it's the same, Jempa Nyeshak Kido, that is possibly the Satipatthana Sutra, the Sanskrit version of it, possibly. In samsara, you'll never find even a needle's tip's worth of happiness. Samsara is suffering, pure and simple. It is devoid of happiness. It is especially true when it comes to the unbearable suffering found in the lower realms, about which Shantideva wrote. When taking into account the sufferings of hell and the other lower realms, the weapons, poisons, fires, ravines, and foes faced by those in the desire realm simply cannot compare. So again, understanding the dualistic condition can create all the 6 realms, including the fires of the hells and the experiences of the hungry ghosts, the animal realms, and so forth, and also those that we have in the higher realms. As long as there is the duality, there's always the insecurity and always the stress of the dualistic condition. The commentary goes on, if our karma simply disappeared without a trace when we died, like a candle going out or a mound of dry grass burning up, then all would be well and good. And that's again, if we're just, once we die, if that's it, our consciousness, if it was something that was like a finger or a nail, or if it was made of stuff, then it would be good. It would come undone, it didn't function anymore, no more. That's where the confusion that we have in the modern world with believing that since everything is matter, and also consciousness must be matter, is so say irresponsible, profoundly deluded, and essentially comes with this sense that, well, we're not going anywhere, nothing will happen. And so, yeah, all would be good if that were the case, but the nature of our consciousness is not compounded, it's not made out of stuff. We can find correlations between our conscious experience and the brain and so forth, but the cause of this, the primary cause, is consciousness. And so the idea that whatever has happened in this life won't really have any consequence when we die is a profound delusion that comes with a highly unusual proposition that we have in the modern world, and which is found in pretty much no other culture. And certainly in the Buddhist teaching here, we're very clear on what happens when we die. And it is not as if things just end there. So that's what Jigme Lingpa goes on to say, but like it or not, we will be reborn. In fact, up until now, we've done many of the things that render the mind lucid and at ease, and these are the things that cause rebirth in a fortunate state of existence. Nor have we done, sorry, let's just see, I might have put a, yeah, in fact, up until now, we haven't done many of the things that render the mind lucid and at ease, and And these are the very things that cause rebirth in a fortunate state of existence. Nor have we done many of these things in our previous lives. Now, of course, what we're saying here is not that we've been bad boys and girls, but we're just ignorant. We didn't know. And so, as a result of not knowing, we've been stumbling around ignorantly in the dark. But our actions have an impact. And so Jigme Lingpa goes on to say, what we are experiencing now is a direct result of that. What's more, we have already accumulated an inconceivable amount of negativity just by playing around. Meaning again, not knowing what's what, stumbling around, grasping for happiness without really understanding what happiness is. If this results in experiencing the suffering of the lower realms, then there isn't the slightest difference between what is occurring in this life and what will occur in our next existence. So if we presently in this life continue to just be blind and ignoring the conditions of karma, of the nature of mind, ignoring the path that leads from confusion, then there's no saying where we'll go. So in understanding the nature of mind and the nature of consciousness, it's of course really a concern that consciousness not understood drives a pattern of alienation between us and the other. It can sometimes be very subtle if we're well, but sometimes it can also spin into really strong sense of division between self and other, and paranoia and aggression, fearful actions. And once we're caught in a cycle of that, it can go on for a very long time. This is not a question of condemnation or punishment, but it's just a state of profound psychosis that goes on and on and on. And so, in understanding the nature of mind, we also need to understand the hotspots of the mind, the places where the mind is not well. And so it makes a lot of sense to look into the particularly painful conditions that the mind can get caught in as a basis for our compassion for those who are caught there, and also for ourselves to be determined not to be caught in that. So in Nagarjuna's Shrulika, Letter to a Friend, it reads, if we suffer just from seeing pictures of hell, and from hearing, remembering, and reading about it, or putting it into form, then what need is there to mention what will happen when we experience this intolerable ripening for ourselves? Again, in most cultures where this is taken to be reality, just like when we see a documentary from a war zone, or we see documentaries about beings that suffer profoundly, we take that in unreservedly with compassion and with an appreciation of the fact that we're not there ourselves. So if we see a documentary from these, we're struck by it. We don't go, oh, rubbish, I don't want to hear about that. Can you please change the channel? I mean, some might do that, but some of us, we do actually, we care. And so in most cultures, when those who have wisdom, those who have insight, they speak about these places, people take it in the same way. What happens nowadays if we go to an Orthodox church and we see the pictures of the hells, we see paintings of Hieronymus Bosch, and if we see pictures in the Buddhist tradition of the hells, then very often the modern person will say, "Oh, rubbish! I don't want to know about this," or "This is just fear mongering by a power hungry clergy," and so forth. This is how I was brought up. I was very critical of religion and the manipulations that religions do, and so on. So there was a strong sense that not only that it wasn't valid, but even indignance that this should not be. This is rubbish, and people shouldn't believe it. And so that's where the majority of our culture, if they come across this, then that's how they would react. So I would say those who practice Buddhism nowadays, they're sort of marginalized because the insights that are being shared by the Buddhists are not only understood, but very often they're reacted to in a very antagonistic way. So I would say these teachings is really important for us to understand really what is meant here and understand this is about consciousness that's caught in a strong deluded condition. And that can happen as long as consciousness is not understood for what it is, as long as we haven't clarified confusion. So Jigme Lingpa goes on to say, if you neglect to contemplate these sufferings by applying them directly to your own experience and simply observe the suffering of others as though you were watching a show, true compassion will not arise in your mind stream. For beginners, it is even difficult for compassion to arise towards sentient beings of their own kind. So you should meditate by cultivating an internal experience as though you yourself are experiencing the suffering. This approach is mentioned in the last testament of the Great Perfection, which states, bring to mind the suffering of the 6 realms. And this is a practice, certainly in the Great Perfection, which is a key component of Great Perfection practice, is actually the experience of the 6 realms. That's basic to the preliminaries and the practice of the Great Perfection. Not in the present context, but overall, this is a key practice in Dzogchen to go through what the confused mind experiences. So here then we'll go through the 8 hot hells. Some people will be familiar with these from Words of My Perfect Teacher. If you're new to Buddhism, then this is in some way adult material. And like I was saying before, it might seem strange to us. But it is really important. And so please listen with an awareness that this is something we contemplate to generate compassion and also to generate awareness around how the mind can spin into painful conditions. So Jigme Lingpa writes, to contemplate this topic, imagine that you have arrived in a strange and desolate land, on the face of a massive snow-covered mountain, with a solid sheet of ice below you. Plunged into pitch darkness, you begin to feel extremely cold. As soon as you get the urge for warmth, you are reborn in the hot hells, instantly transported, as in a confused dream. The ground below you is red-hot iron, and you are completely surrounded by terrifying burning metal. There is no way to tell down from up, as the whole place is filled with red, flickering flames. Consciousness produces the world around us. So when we experience aggression, we might not experience as we're seeing it here, but nevertheless, it's potentially there. And our experience of the world around us is one of being antagonistic, one that produces fear and paranoia. So even though we live in a comfortable human realm, right now being born a human and having the relative pleasure and comfort of the human realm, we can nevertheless spin into strong delusion. This can come on the basis of illness, it can come on the case of physical illness or mental illness or chemicals and so on. And just a pattern of fearfulness and alienation, where then the world around us reflects that. So in the Buddhist context, we speak very much about how the perception of the environment reflects the inner consciousness. In this raging expanse, first you find the reviving hell, where there are an incalculable number of sentient beings, all of whom resemble you. Overcome with anger, you beat each other with weapons, and your bodies end up being chopped into hundreds and thousands of pieces. The unbearable pain is so intense that you occasionally fall unconscious. Just when you think you're about to die, a voice from the sky bellows, "Revive," and you return to your previous condition. You undergo these extremely intolerable forms of suffering over and over again. In the Black Line Hell, the fearsome guardians of hell marked 8 lines on your body and cut along them with sharp saws. The pain is unbearable, and you scream in agony and long to escape. Next, meditate on the crushing hell. You find yourself between mountains shaped like the heads of bulls, lions, goats, and sheep. You're squeezed between them like eggshells being crushed, and streams of blood gush from every last pore in your body. The pain and suffering are unbearable, and you long to escape. In the wailing hell, you find yourself inside an iron building, and the doors are sealed shut. Fire blazes from all directions, incinerating your body until there is nothing left but ash. Realizing there is no escape, you let out a mournful cry. You are stuffed into another iron building, which is enclosed by the first, the howling hell. Realizing that even if you were to get out of the first building, you would still not be able to get out of the second one. You experience twice as much suffering as before. Your plight is extremely wretched. In the inferno, you are impaled with a blazing iron stake through the anus all the way to the crown of your head. Red tongues of fire blaze from all your sense gates. At times your whole body is submerged in a cauldron of molten metal, and you are tortured as your flesh melts off your bones. In the great inferno you are impaled with a trident. The center prong stabs through the crown of your head, and the other 2 prongs pierce your right and left shoulders. A sheet of burning iron is wrapped around you like a blanket, and your flesh is cooked raw in boiling molten metal. This causes your skin and flesh to come off until nothing is left but a skeleton. Born as a being in this realm, your suffering is 100 times more intense than what you experienced before. The unbearable pain causes you to let out a whole range of piercing cries and screams as you long to escape. The hell of incessant torment is an infinite boundless expanse of incredibly hot, blazing flames that incinerate your body so completely that it is no longer distinguishable from the fire. Aside from the intense screams that can be heard, physical bodies cannot even be seen there. The suffering is unbearable, and intense and anguished cries are heard throughout. As you envision all this, the King of Great Bliss from Udayana appears in the sky before you. Gurudeva Chimpo. Alas, you unfortunate being, he says, you have accumulated a tremendous amount of karma spurred on by your own anger. The violent anger you directed towards a particular object has resulted in the suffering you now experience in these hells. Now confess your non-virtuous acts with intense regret, and cultivate great compassion for all sentient beings in a similar plight. If you arouse the courage to take the suffering of others, you may be free yourself. Long ago, Shakyamuni was born as the strongman Pakshita in hell, where he had to pull a wagon. His companion at the time, Kamarupa, aroused the wrath of the gods by not doing his share of the work. The enraged gods beat him on the head with iron hammers. Seeing this, Shakyamuni felt boundless compassion for his friend. The wish to trade his own happiness for the suffering of another was born in his mind. "Please put the rope of this wagon around my neck," he asked. The guardians of hell, however, responded by saying, "Who can experience the karma of another?" and began beating him on the head with a hammer. He died in an instant, only to be reborn in the heaven of the 33, where he was liberated from his own suffering. So in the midst of this condition of suffering, this is a famous anecdote about the Buddha's, in a previous life, his first actually moment of engendering bodhicitta, because seeing his friend Kamarupa suffer, he then said, well, we're suffering here, both of us, I might as well do the job for 2. And because he couldn't bear how the other one was suffering. And that empathy took him out of hell instantly. So we can understand that we're not talking about eternal condemnation. We're not speaking about this as some sort of punishment for not having been doing the right thing or not being loyal to somebody or etc. It's just a phenomenology of knowing what happens to the confused mind that's embraced by aggression. The sense that self and other is alienated, and there's a sense of um, fear and hatred with regards to the other spins off, because the more then you act on that, the more the other comes back. So the nature of hell is such that it's incredibly painful. And while we are presently in a condition where we can experience the causes of this, what we're talking about here is more when the mind is left on its own, without the body of the higher realm that we have presently, then this kind of hallucination takes place. So we have to understand the Buddha is not telling us this to instill fright, but more awareness of the condition of the confused mind. Hearing this story, Jigme Lingpa then continues. Hearing this story, you arouse bodhicitta and think, even if I have to stay here, I will bear it so long as the other sentient beings like me are liberated from this suffering. As soon as you generate this intention, a hook-like ray of white light bursts forth from the heart center of the great master Buddhayana. The two of you emerge inseparably, and you attain Buddhahood endowed with the ability to accomplish both your own and others' benefits spontaneously. Next, imagine that a similar light emanates from your own heart center, each instantly summoning all sentient beings and emptying the realms of hell. So this is the practice, the visualization, imagining the suffering of hell, and then invoking the embodiment of our enlightened ground, the great master Buddhayana, then fusing with the awake and unconfused condition of this mind, settling into that place which is free from aggression, which is free from duality, and familiarizing ourselves with this condition is what brings an end to the confusion that generates this kind of experience. And that from there then we have the compassion that wishing to benefit others. And that's then what this light emanating signifies. So, just on the topic here, does that mean when the time of life yeah, we're going to actually look in the next section. It actually describes the health. So there's a questions about the lifespan in the health. But yes, when we have that situation with conflict and alienation with the other, this reflects in the environment and so forth. This perpetuates itself. So somebody says, I can't see your face. Is that me or no? That's you. I have the camera on here. So that's from this side. Yep, it's working. So yeah. So we'll actually talk about the lifespans, but when we're talking about taking refuge, we sometimes say taking refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. In the Vajrayana, we take refuge in the three roots. And we generally would say three roots are then the inner aspect, which is the Guru, the Yidam, and the Dakini. So we would generally say the Guru is the root of blessing. The Yidam is the root of accomplishment, and the and the Dakini, the Ngondro, is the root of accomplishment. So there's quite a lot to be said about that, but on a very immediate level, we could say the root of the Guru enables us to understand the nature of the mind and to experience it. The Yidam is then engaging in the nature of the mind And the dakini is then, through the purity of our practice, then engaging all the powers of nature around us. So the various practices that we have in the context of the three roots, they of course all are engaging in the Vajrayana method of seeing enlightenment as already spontaneously present within ourselves. But then, particularly then, the guru is the ground of the mind, and the yidam is the way that mind manifests, and the dakini are all the ways of the way that the perceptions they arise. So there's many explanations on the nature of the three roots, but basically we want to appreciate that this is Vajrayana. So where the general Buddhist teaching takes refuge in the Buddha Dharma Sangha, and the Vajrayana has the inner aspect of engaging the enlightened mind as it abides inwardly, the Buddha within through the practice of the three roots in a very skillful way, and then also in the absolute we speak about then the refuge being the three kayas, the three aspects of the awakened mind. All right, I guess that's it. There's no more questions. All right. So thank you very much for joining me in this study, and shall see you again next week. Through this virtue may all beings throughout existence awaken together without a single being left behind in the pure realm of the luminous essence, the ground of the great perfection. May they remain inseparable from the kayas and wisdoms. Through all our births, wherever we may be born, may we be endowed with the 7 good qualities of the higher realms. As soon as we are born, may we meet with the Dharma and have the freedom to practice it properly. At that time, may we please the holy gurus and practice the Dharma throughout the day and night. Realizing the Dharma and accomplishing its essential meaning, may we cross the oceans of existence in that life. Thoroughly teaching the holy Dharma in this world, may we never tire of accomplishing the benefit of others. By this vast benefit of others, without partiality or bias, may all attain Buddhahood together.